very excited to have with me Zachary Karabell, the president of River Twice Research and River Twice Capital, and an author and columnist for Newsweek and the Daily Beast. You have a lot of different hats you wear.
They are different hats focused on the same general subjects.
Right. And what are those subjects?
Focused on what's going on in our economy and in a money management perspective, what's going on in companies trying to become or being forced to become more efficient by virtue of rising commodity costs and rising input costs.
And do you think sustainability really can accelerate profit?
I think companies, in order to grow in a global environment where resource costs are going up, but pricing is not. So if you want to sell a lot of things to China and India and Brazil, there's a lot to be sold, but it's at a much lower price point than you have in the United States. That in order to do that profitably, when faced with rising input costs, you have to figure out a way to reduce those costs, either by using less stuff or coming up with lower cost stuff. That is a definition of sustainability, because in doing that, companies end up reducing their resource use and thereby lowering their carbon footprint. But not because they've decided or feel like sustainability is a good thing, or because sustainability as a category of how one does business is in itself profitable.
And what's an example that we can look at to kind of think about that?
And almost any large global consumer company, whether you're a clothing manufacturer, whether you're a Procter & Gamble, if you're Procter & Gamble and you can't really raise the cost of your products, if anything, you've got to fight against the cost of your toothpaste and shampoos not going down, and you're faced with the same raw materials, they have become much more creative about how they package those, how much they use of them, which they use. And all of that does have a sustainability component in that it reduces their carbon impact, it reduces their consumption. But it is being driven by a relentless need to meet a bottom line and to maintain margins.
And let's talk about the panel you were on today that you just got off of. What were you all discussing, and what was your main argument on the panel?
Well, it was the final panel of the day. So we were discussing, I think, a lot of 30,000 foot. Is there some ideal of businesses and sustainability, of feeling like they have some level of stewardship to the planet? Is that ideal in any way making its way into the real world? And then faced also with just the overall questions that all these panels and all these discussions are, which is, given how accelerated the rate of climate change is, really is there going to be anything that's going to arrest that development, or are we simply going to be living in a world where we have to acclimate ourselves to a much changed climate because of a much higher carbon emission?
And what's your conclusion there?
My conclusion is, unfortunately, for the next 10 years, things are likely to get worse. Worse in the sense of carbon emissions, worse in the sense of, as hundreds of millions of people enter some version of the middle class in Brazil and in China and eventually in India and Indonesia, that they're going to look for sources of energy and for goods that, frankly, are going to be resource intensive or more resource intensive than we would like, which means in that respect it will get worse. On the flip side, at least personally, I'm more of a cup half full person. I think a lot of these discussions have as much to do with what's your lens on the human experience as it does with anything provable, because none of us entirely know what the future is going to be as much as we would like to. And there, I think that there is sufficient innovation and sufficient attention to the limitation of resources and the excessive amount of demand for them, that I see a lot of creativity at both a company and global level, whether it's new forms of energy, whether it's new ways of making old products. And while you're going to see a lot of noise, you're going to hear a lot of noise and see a lot of messiness over the next decade, I think that the seeds are much more in place for some of these innovations to solve many of these issues.
I like that optimistic approach. So keep up the good work, and thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you.